The artifact hovered in the center of the Grand Xenological Archive, suspended by a lattice of gravitic fields and humming with barely contained energy. Its surface was carved with shallow, angular symbols that spiraled endlessly around a cylindrical frame of dark, unknown alloy. For 87 cycles, the relic had resisted every attempt at interpretation. Entire academic careers had been built, and ruined, around its mystery. Now it waited silently as another species failed to impress it. The gathered scholars formed a semicircle, their robes and exoskeletal adornments marking them as the highest intellectual authorities of the galactic concord. At the far end stood a single human, noticeably smaller, unadorned, and distinctly unimpressive by their standards. Elias Ward clasped his hands behind his back and studied the artifact with quiet focus. "This is a waste of archival time," sneered Archivist Korath, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "These symbols are senseless. Random. Decorative at best." Several scholars emitted clicking laughter. "Humans have barely joined the Concord," another added. "What insight could one possibly offer where thousands have failed?" Elias did not respond. He had learned, during humanity's short and turbulent expansion into galactic society, that indignation accomplished nothing. Observation did. He took a slow step forward, stopping just short of the containment field. The symbols were shallow, uniform, and repeated with deliberate spacing. The others had catalogued them as a failed language, an extinct script without grammar or translation. That assumption bothered him. "You may proceed," Korath said dismissively. "Provide us with your perspective." Elias leaned closer, eyes tracing the spirals. "How many times has this particular symbol appeared?" he asked, pointing without touching. A technician checked the archive display. 73, she replied. "And this one?" 109. "And that?" 137. A ripple of irritation passed through the council. "And?" Korath demanded. "Do these quantities entertain you?" "No," Elias said calmly. "They inform me." Laughter erupted again. "These are numbers," Korath scoffed. "We tested numerical hypotheses cycles ago. They led nowhere." "Because you treated them like language," Elias replied. "You searched for meaning instead of structure." The laughter faltered. Elias straightened slightly, his voice steady but firm. "These symbols aren't words. They're counts, ratios, patterns. Whoever made this wasn't trying to tell a story. They were teaching something." Silence crept into the chamber, thin and uncertain. "For the first time," Elias continued, "you may have been asking the wrong question." The scholars shifted uneasily, their confidence bruised but not broken. Korath folded his upper limbs together, posture rigid. "An extraordinary claim," he said. "You imply that every mind in this chamber misunderstood an artifact for nearly a century." "I imply nothing," Elias replied. "I'm pointing out a pattern." He gestured again, this time to a vertical sequence etched near the artifact's lower rim. 3 symbols here. Then 5. Then 7. Then 11. Then 13. A murmur spread across the semicircle. "Prime numbers," Elias said. "Sequential. Ascending. Intentionally ordered." "That proves nothing," snapped Scholar Vethrix. "Coincidence exists." "So does probability," Elias answered. "And this exceeds it." A data projection flared to life as several scholars began running fresh analyses, begrudging curiosity overriding pride. The results appeared almost immediately, statistical models aligning with Elias's claims at alarming precision. 96% correlation, one whispered. Korath's mandibles tightened. "Continue," he said. Elias moved slowly around the artifact, eyes never leaving the symbols. The lower section introduces counting. Frequency. Ratios. Here, he indicated a curved sequence, is the relationship between diameter and circumference. "Impossible," Vethrix muttered. "That ratio is universal." "Exactly," Elias said. "That's the point." Realization rippled through the chamber like a gravitational wave. The artifact was not cultural. It was instructional. "These aren't messages," Elias continued. "They're lessons. Mathematics stripped of language, reduced to fundamentals any sufficiently intelligent species could recognize." The laughter was gone now. Korath stepped closer, his earlier disdain replaced by something approaching awe. "You are suggesting this artifact was designed to be understood by strangers?" "Yes," Elias said. "By anyone capable of recognizing numbers." Another scholar gasped. "A primer." Elias nodded. "A foundation. Which means what comes next builds upon it." He pointed toward the artifact's upper region, where the symbols grew denser, more complex, layered in interlocking sequences. This section assumes the reader has learned the basics. Kortha's voice lowered. And what does it teach? Elias stared at the patterns, his breath slowing. Application. Calculations streamed across the holographic displays as the council raced to keep up. Equations emerged. Ratios aligned. Energy models began to form. One scholar dropped to the floor, stunned. These aren't abstractions, Elias said quietly. They're instructions. For what? Korth asked. Elias swallowed. For building something. The artifact hummed softly, indifferent to the revelation it had just unleashed. The chamber erupted into controlled chaos as the scholars cross-referenced Elias's interpretations against known physical constants. Equations that had once seemed impossible began resolving themselves with horrifying elegance. Energy efficiencies surpassed known limits. Spatial distortion models aligned with theoretical impossibilities long dismissed as fantasy. This configuration, Elias said, tracing a complex spiral near the artifact's apex, depicts controlled spacetime compression. Korth froze. Say that again. Faster than light propulsion, Elias replied. Not a theory. A blueprint. The room fell deathly silent. That technology predates the Concorde, Vethrix whispered. By millennia. And exceeds it, another added. By orders of magnitude. Elias nodded grimly. The creators weren't just advanced. They were generous. Korth studied the artifact with newfound reverence. They left this behind, for us? For anyone who could understand it, Elias said. They assumed curiosity, patience, humility. Several scholars looked away. You searched for meaning shaped like yourselves, Elias continued. Language, culture. But numbers don't belong to anyone. They belong to reality. Korth exhaled slowly. We dismissed your species as primitive. You dismissed us as young, Elias corrected gently. There's a difference. A long pause followed. We counted long before we traveled the stars, Elias said. We measured seasons, distances, time. We learned the universe speaks in quantities, not words. The artifact pulsed faintly, its surface catching the chamber lights like distant stars. This device, Korth said, voice heavy, will change everything. Yes, Elias agreed. That was likely the intention. The scholars gathered closer now, no longer mocking, no longer superior. They listened as Elias explained the final sequences, each revelation stripping away centuries of assumed dominance. At its core, Elias concluded, this artifact isn't a weapon or a warning. It's an invitation. To what? Korth asked. To learn, Elias said. Properly. Silence settled again, this time filled with respect. The Grand Archive, once certain of its own supremacy, had been humbled by a species that asked simpler questions and noticed quieter truths. And somewhere in the cold dark between galaxies, the long-dead architects of the artifact would have smiled, knowing that numbers had spoken clearly at last. The Concorde Council convened within the hour, their emergency summons echoing across star systems. Yet within the archive chamber, time felt suspended. The scholars no longer stood apart from Elias. They stood beside him. Korth placed a ceremonial limb against his chest, an ancient gesture of acknowledgement rarely offered to outsiders. Human Elias Ward, he said, you have altered the course of galactic history. Elias shook his head. I only listened. To what? Vethrix asked quietly. To the universe, Elias replied. It's always counting. Data cores hummed as the artifact's contents were finally understood, its lessons unfolding layer by layer. The faster-than-light design was elegant, restrained, and impossibly efficient. It did not conquer space. It cooperated with it. This knowledge, Korth said, was never meant to be hoarded. No, Elias agreed. It was meant to be shared. A scholar glanced at the human. Your species solved this because you lacked assumptions. Elias smiled faintly. We had plenty. We just learned early how often they're wrong. When the council finally arrived, they found their greatest minds seated in quiet reflection, their certainty dismantled. Reports spread rapidly. Humanity's reputation shifted overnight, from novice participants to indispensable collaborators. The artifact was reclassified, no longer a relic of failure but a triumph of communication beyond biology. As Elias prepared to leave, Korth stopped him. There will be those who resent this. There always are, Elias said. Still, Korth added, you have earned something rare today. What's that? Trust. Elias considered that, then nodded. That's a good place to start. As he exited the archive, the artifact continued its slow rotation, patient as mathematics itself. It had waited centuries for someone willing to see numbers where others demanded words. Humanity had not shouted its brilliance. It had simply counted. And in doing so, it reminded the galaxy of a truth older than language, older than pride, and older than stars themselves. Numbers do not lie. They only wait to be understood.